Is your job search stuck? Maybe you're not getting any interviews with employers. Or maybe you are, but no job offers. Or you may be new and not even know where to start. This is Charles Max Wood, and I'm releasing a new course and ebook on how to find a job as a software developer. The course walks you through the process of finding the types of companies you want to work for, getting their attention, and putting your best foot forward as the candidate they want. I've coached dozens of developers in looking for jobs and have been able to help several people find jobs within 2 weeks to 2 months. So whether you're new to development, can't find a great job that fits what you want, or are looking for remote work from an area without a strong tech community, I can help. Go to getacoderjob.com and sign up today. Hi, this is Charles Max Wood, and I've been asked more times than I can count, how do I stay current? There's a lot to this question, and I'm working on a solution: code badges. That's right, you heard me right. Basically, the idea is that you come and do a code badge, and that gets you an introduction to a topic. Then you can decide if you want to pursue it further. But while working on the badge, you gain enough proficiency to be able to pick it up again if you need. A lot of technology comes through on the bleeding edge, and not all of it sticks, but the principles do. So doing badges on the technologies that will get you ahead will provide you with experience needed to stay competitive. Plus, it offers social proof that you know something about the topic. The project is on Kickstarter right now. You can support it and get on the launch list at codebadge.org.
Hey everybody, and welcome to another My.js story, or My Angular story. We actually have Joe Eames, who's on both JavaScript Jabber and Adventures in Angular. So we're going to make this interview do double duty, and if you're not interested in the Angular bits of things, you can just tune out for part of it, I guess. Okay. All right, so let's dig in. The first question is, how did you get into programming? Or how did you get started?
Well, it kind of depends on your definition. So when I was like 16, I was in high school, and there was a class that I was taking that I actually had to go to the University of Utah. So I drove every day. I only had like half day at the high school, and then I drove up to the university to take a class. And since I was up there, I of course needed a job, right? A kid's got to have a job to have money for dates and stuff. So I worked at the movie theater, and my boss was a major jerk, and we got in an argument over me being late and lying about it. So he put me on suspension. I was like, I'm going to go find a new job. Found a job at the University of Utah and at the mailing bureau. But what we were doing was data entry, and they had this dBase database. So my very first kind of programming job was doing a little bit of dBase database maintenance. All right. So that's kind of my first programming job. But then when I turned 19 and graduated from high school, I went and served 2 years for an LDS mission. When I came back from that,
Where'd you go?
I started off in Russia. I was there for like 5 weeks, but then I went to Portland because we walked a lot, and I had really bad knees. And moving to Portland. So I spent 2 years in Portland, which was awesome, other than the rain. I would love Portland if it wasn't so rainy all the time.
Yep. Anyway.
So after that, I came back home, and I needed a job, and I found this job at this place that would kind of it was a very technical. They were growing, right? They were a computer company, and they did data entry as well, and they were growing like crazy. And so they hired me as sort of a semi-technical guy. I was doing some wiring and other things. And one manager came to my manager and said, "Hey, I need a programmer for this project for just a short while. Can I borrow one of yours?" And he says, "I can't spare any of mine, but I got this guy that I'm not using a ton, and I know that he's taking some programming classes." So he handed me Foxpro books. And since I've been doing dBase, Foxpro isn't too far off. So he handed me a Foxpro books. It says, if you could do this by on Mondays, like Friday, he says, if you could do this on Monday, then I'll hire you. Right? To program for me. So I spent a weekend just reading Foxpro. This is back in the days. Nowadays, you don't get manuals with a language, right?
Right.
You go online and you look for training courses and blog posts, and you go through online courses or school courses. But back then, languages were all done by some company, and they had manuals, right? And that was it. That was for documentation. That was it. There was no there was no internet at the time. I guess it had barely opened up. This is like 97. Right? It had barely opened up. So you didn't go to the internet to find out how to program. You read the manual. So I spent a whole weekend reading Foxpro manuals. And then I came back, and it was so funny, that first job. I was so terrible. I didn't know anything. I remember I had to do this very, very basic data copy. And rather than actually joining two tables using a SQL join to figure out, find the correlating data and copy it from one place to another, I actually opened up two browse windows where I was looking at the two tables of data I needed to deal with. And I just lined them up side by side and put the scroll. I sorted them the same way and put the scroll bars so they lined up, and I was like manually copying data, basically doing data entry because it needed to be done and I needed to do it quick and I didn't know how to do it any other way.
That's amazing.
I remember that was so funny. And then we had a little department of 2 guys, and next door was a department of 2 guys. One of those guys was a super friendly guy, very nice. So I was constantly over there asking him questions like, all right, how do I do this? How do I do that? Man, I remember he had this coworker one day that was like, why don't you go do your own job and stop making our guys do your job? Which I didn't take to very kindly. I don't know if that had much of an effect on the fact that I love to do education, but it always rubbed me the wrong way that a guy would treat somebody else that way, you know? Uh-huh. So I only worked there for like 3 months and then found another job and more Fox Pro, and eventually the internet got big, and then internet programming was kind of the thing. So then I kind of switched over to more internet-based languages and left Fox Pro behind.
Wasn't Fox Pro a Microsoft technology? Or
Yes, it was. So there's like this strange history with these dBase languages. They call them X-based languages. Fox Pro, Clipper, and dBase all kind of shared things. Microsoft sort of bought some patents from another company and then developed Fox Pro kind of on their own. And some of the technologies, it was a database. It was a lot like what Access is today, right? It's the database and a language all integrated together.
Right.
And you could do visual forms and things like that, like you can in Access. So it was fun. It was interesting programming, but you were very intimate with the data. I kind of liked it. Nowadays, you got to transmit large quantities of JSON over the wire, and they look entirely different. And back then it was a little bit different way to do things. But yeah, it was owned by Microsoft. So I felt very much like a Microsoft guy. So when I started doing .NET, it was very natural for me it was Visual Basic first. And then it was .NET right after Visual Basic. Had a short time of Visual Basic when COM was all the rage. For anybody out there that's old enough to remember COM was a big rage at the time.
So how do you go then from Fox Pro and Microsoft technologies to JavaScript? How did you get into JavaScript?
That was a very conscious effort on my part. So I was doing .NET and I did it through, I don't know, like 07 or something. Maybe 08, and jQuery came out in 06, and JavaScript, I had bought maybe 1 or 2 books, and this, back then it was still, when you wanted to learn more stuff, you went to the bookstore and you bought books, right? Nowadays, if anybody who's been programming for less than, I don't know, like 5 years, you'd hear the idea of buying a book to learn programming, and you think, what? That's a dinosaur tactic, right?
Oh, I still have my JavaScript manual.
Yeah.
That's the comprehensive one with the rhino on the front.
Oh, yeah. Yep. Good stuff. So I bought a couple of JavaScript books to do just, back in the early part of the century, you'd only use JavaScript to do like validation, right? Uh-huh. And there was this awesome new emergent technology that looked so cool. Everybody was raving about called DHTML.
Oh, yeah.
And, we'd heard about it. And some people in my office were like doing it, but I was all confused. Like, I don't get what this is. And I mean, I kind of got it, but I didn't ever really do much with it. And I just sort of, things were going along. I've been programming in .NET now for quite a few years, long enough that for some reason, I guess maybe it was getting that 7-year itch. And I just said, I want to do something different. And we were doing web technology stuff. We were building websites, which is really fun. But it's like thinking to myself, I want to get heavier into JavaScript. So this is right around 09, maybe. And I just made this conscious decision. I said, you know what? I'm going to leave behind everything that I'm doing, and I'm going to go heavy into JavaScript. I want to learn everything there is to know about JavaScript. Knockout had come out at the time. I think Backbone was out at that time and kind of popular. jQuery certainly was. And so I looked for a new job and found a job where I was basically doing just front-end stuff. It turned out to be kind of a bust because it was CSS. It was mostly what they wanted me to do. And it wasn't even like hard CSS. It was like this really weird kind of CSS maintenance things. So I didn't really learn a lot of CSS. I'm definitely not a CSS expert, but it was a very conscious choice. So I eventually found a job where it was just a front-end JavaScript developer. And I'd learned enough JavaScript by that point that I felt very comfortable with it and was capable. But the last couple of years, I'd spent more and more efforts to learn more and more JavaScript and play around with Backbone and Knockout and learn those technologies. And so I just decided I want to be a JavaScript developer, and I don't want to. If I do any backend, I want it to be a small amount of time. And I was lucky to find a job that was all front end JavaScript.
It's funny though. I don't know if you're new to programming. I don't know if you understand, but that was a weird thing about.
Yeah.
I mean, even 5 or 6 years ago, it was a weird thing to be a front end developer because honestly, JavaScript was kind of the arcane part of building websites, and you knew your back-end technology, and then you would bolt in whatever jQuery pieces you needed. And some people had like jQuery plugins and jQuery UI and things like that. But yeah, it seems like a little bit of a risky move. Yeah.
I mean, I just felt like I'd seen a couple of things. One, I was really into like engineering practices, so pair programming and testing and unit testing and test-driven development. I was way into that sort of stuff. In fact, the very first time that I was on JavaScript Jabber, around episode 20, was to talk about testing in JavaScript. And I'd immerse myself into it because one of the things I saw pretty quickly, being heavily into that sort of realm and wanting to get more and more into JavaScript, was like nobody was doing testing in JavaScript. Nobody's talking about it. Nobody's doing it. And I think I had this like epiphany, and that was JavaScript is this unknown frontier where nothing's been done. Mm-hmm. But by that time, Gmail was out and people were seeing the power of really good JavaScript interfaces. And I said to myself, right now it's a lot cheaper to do development full stack, right? Do your server side rendered stuff the way the ASP.NET did it or Rails did it. I knew that it was cheaper then, but I felt like it was going to become more and more in demand to have heavy front end clients. And, jQuery, of course, was like, hey, we'll give you some tools to do some cool stuff. But Knockout and Backbone were more like, hey, here's the tools to write your whole front end, and all you need to get for the back end is JSON. So I think I was very aware and almost prophetic in seeing this sort of stuff and saying, the front end is going to get really big and it's going to get very serious. And by 2010, there was, a fair number of front end jobs around, but still I was working with all these .NET guys. And when I quit my job, the job that was doing the CSS, and the reason I'd quit is because I wasn't doing enough JavaScript. And I said, when I came here, what I thought I was going to do is not what I was doing. And I want a job where I was spending at least 70% of my time doing JavaScript. And my boss took me for this walk and he says, do you even think that there's jobs out there like that? And I said, I'm pretty sure there are. And it didn't take me too long. I did a little contract for Pluralsight and built their first version of their video player in HTML5. But I found this job over at Domo doing full-time front-end JavaScript, nothing else. I didn't touch another language for, years, really. I rarely touch any other language nowadays. So it was just all JavaScript and all front-end, and it was great. It was amazing. And I met some amazing people who knew so much and realized how deep the rabbit hole went, right? Met Merritt Christensen, who knew JavaScript so well and taught me tons and tons and tons of stuff. Yep. And in return, I taught him to pair program and test drive code. So it worked out pretty well. Kent Dodds, a lot of people will know who Kent C. Dodds is. I met him there and taught him to test drive code as well. So we had a lot of fun. And I think I just knew that it would be an exciting place and an unknown frontier and a great place to come and do new things. And there would be a lot of change and a lot of big advancements and a lot of opportunity to be involved in really fixing big problems, right? Yeah. And I've definitely found that to be the case. It's
interesting, you talked about it as kind of this open frontier. And my friend Brandon Hayes gave a talk about the hype cycle for programming and programming languages and frameworks and stuff. And there's a group like you that go in right at the beginning of a technology, and they're kind of the pioneers. And so they go out there in kind of the unspoiled land, and they figure out what it's going to take to be out there. And they start setting up the general stores and the forts and all of the things that provide infrastructure for the people who are coming later. And then people come in and actually move in and build up and do all the other things. And I feel like that's kind of where JavaScript is now. And then a lot of people will come in after everything is fully established and kind of enjoy the benefits that are there. And so it's interesting to see that, yeah, you were one of those people that kind of said, you know what, I'm going to go stake some ground out here and figure out how to do it.
Right. And we all know the names of the big pioneers that have done amazing things. Well, I mean, a lot of these guys, maybe not necessarily their names are known, but John Resig and Dan Abramov and people that are YCats, right? People that are really doing amazing things. And those names are really well known, but I definitely found that there was a lot to do. Even just, I became an educator about that time and got more and more and more into education. And I found that there was a lot to do just in telling people, helping people learn this stuff, right? And I didn't have to be the guy who invented Redux to feel like I really contributed to the market and contributed to the landscape of where it's at. So you don't have to look at it and say, boy, Redux has already been invented. There's no reason for me to try to help out. It's the exact opposite now. Yep. There's so much to do and so many great places to help out with.
It's so true. And I encourage anybody. So the week before this one comes out, I just did an interview with Isaac Schluter, who built NPM, and he maintained Node for a little while after Ryan Dahl left. And, he kind of told the story of this same kind of moving into this space and solving some of these problems and just kind of how it started. And yeah, like NPM just started out as a series of scripts that made it easier to modularize your JavaScript. And then they added the registry, and then they bolted on some of these other features. And it's kind of interesting that, now it's this big established thing in the Node and JavaScript communities. And, it just started out as something simple because there really wasn't anything else there.
Right.
So the next question is, the next question, honestly, would be, how did you get into Angular? But I'm curious, were you as early an adopter on Angular as you were on JavaScript?
Darn close. I think I started using Angular pretty heavily around 2010, 2011. Right in there. It was so early. I'd never heard of Angular when I started using it because we were doing this. It was actually this HTML5 video player for Pluralsight. And they were all testing, all pairing, 100% pair program, 100% test-driven code type of place. And at the time, the frameworks that are available were Backbone, Ember, and then we discovered Angular. But Backbone, I'd done it before and wasn't really crazy about it. So we looked at Ember, but at the time, nobody knew how to do any testing with Ember. So we quickly abandoned that. But the guy I was working with, Jim Cooper, he had stumbled upon Angular and said, hey, there's this Angular tool and front-end framework, and it says it supports unit testing, which it did. It was like, built in from the ground, right from the get-go. So that was when we started using Angular, and we both quickly fell in love with it and said, wow, this is so great compared to what we'd had with Backbone and Knockout, right? It was just such a huge step forward.
What was it about Angular that made you go, oh, we got to use this, as opposed to, Knockout or Backbone?
Well, obviously, the one criteria was that it was testable. But I think once we started playing around with it and we saw that, oh, my gosh, you can just go into the HTML and put in a few little things. And Backbone kind of had that same concept. You'd go in and kind of write your bindings. But to hook it up was a lot worse, where with Angular, the two-way binding, you just throw something in HTML and then just have a piece of data in that controller, and boom, everything was hooked up and working together. That was like a big moment for me, playing around with that and going, oh my gosh, this is so easy, it's so quick. Nowadays, we take that sort of stuff for granted, right? It's like ground zero. That's like baseline is, can you do that? But at the time, it was very novel to have these sort of bindings and not have to jump through a bunch of hoops like we did with Knockout to get them to work, and have all the other pieces involved. Oh, services to encapsulate your logic, and it felt very structured for us. So it was a huge deal.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting because when we started Adventures in Angular, you and Merrick pushed me. You must have asked me like 3 times before I finally said, okay, let's do this.
Right.
And, once I got into it and saw some of that, it was, because I was very comfortable with the back end rendered, DOM and things like that. But yeah, just finding that power and going, hey, look, I can push all the information I need into the front end, and then the front end just kind of does its thing, and it's mostly decoupled from the back end unless I need to store or update something. And it works pretty seamlessly and flawlessly and gives me a whole lot more power.
Right. And to correct something that you said, it was Aaron Frost that we started Adventures in Angular with, not Merrick.
Oh, okay.
Want to get that name right. But yeah, it was so not groundbreaking. I don't know. Did you feel the same way when you started getting into Angular?
Yeah, I did. I mean, things have been such that I didn't get as deep into Angular 1 as I wanted to. And recently I decided I'm going to build a single page app so that I can get more into Angular 2. But at this point, I don't see a lot of value going back to Angular 1 as opposed to just looking forward from Angular 2. So right. I don't have that deep expertise, but I did use it on a few projects, not to the extent of actually like setting up a single page app. Mm-hmm. But, I had some web pages where it was like, you know what, I need, when somebody submits a form, for it to change, or, I need some other things on the page to be coordinated with it. And so I did use it for those kinds of things where I had, controllers and directives working together in order to manipulate the page. But it was relatively simple stuff that just took advantage of the two-way data binding and some eventing in Angular 1.
Right. Yeah, it was definitely a big deal.
So the next question is, what have you done within the Angular and JavaScript communities? I think ngconf is the one that stands out to me, but are there other things that you want to talk about here? Maybe?
Yeah, ngconf is probably the highest profile thing that I've done, other than maybe these podcasts, right? Getting to be on JavaScript Jabber and Adventures in Angular have been really big things for me. I was very close to joining the Angular team. But like many things, it was like being, the runner-up for Miss America is not Miss America. I was definitely the runner-up for Miss America. Right? Always a bridesmaid, never a bride. So yeah. I interviewed twice with the Angular team and thought that I was going to be joining them and helping to build Angular itself. And instead, I went into Pluralsight and started doing that heavily, but definitely ngconf is the big thing. Now we got ng Cruise, right? I already got a spin-off of ngconf, and who knows, maybe there'll be more. So getting in the conference scene has been pretty fun.
Yeah, let's go through these kind of chronologically. So I think of the 3 or 4 things you've mentioned here, JavaScript Jabber is the earliest.
Yep.
Yep. I'm curious, because I don't know that we've ever really talked deeply about this, but what have you liked or not liked? What's your experience been being a member of the JavaScript Jabber panel?
So far, I've liked everything other than being the only panelist that shows up.
Yeah, that sucks when that happens, doesn't it?
Right. I mean, sometimes we have like these guests on that you're just like, oh my gosh, I get to meet and sit and talk with, whoever. Brendan Ike would probably be the top in my list of the people that we've had on the show, right?
Yep.
The people that I would just, oh my gosh, I'd just love to shake your hand. How much do I have to pay to get a signed autograph of yours, right? A picture, and right? That's the kind of guy that is. And then we've had, the range down to people that I had no idea who they were and were very nice, right? So that part's been very awesome, is just getting to meet lots of really cool people and hear about lots of really cool products as well. I've really liked that aspect of it. And we've got a lot of great panelists. We've gone through quite a few panelists in the 200 and some odd episodes we've done.
Yep.
So I've really enjoyed being part of JavaScript Jabber for sure. Something I don't want to give up. I really, really liked it.
Yeah, and that for me, it's a lot of the same, getting to meet and see people. The other thing that I've really enjoyed about JavaScript Jabber and Adventures in Angular in particular, Ruby Rogues, I used to get this out of it, but I don't as much anymore. And that's just, I get challenged with a new topic, like a new technology that I don't know, or a new reason for doing something a certain way that I had never thought of before, or things like that. And so I just like kind of the brain tweaking bits of this that is like, oh, I had never thought of doing something that way.
Right. Yeah, a lot of cool ideas, a lot of cool ways to do things. Yep. Get exposed to a lot of cool stuff.
Yeah, what about Adventures in Angular? Is it kind of the same, or is there something different about that?
I think in Adventures in Angular, what might be a little bit different for me is I feel like a lot of the audience might know who I am from other work that I've done, just even from organizing ngconf. So on a JavaScript Jabber, I kind of feel like a nobody. In Adventures in Angular, I feel like a little bit of a somebody, right? So that might be one of the differences for me when dealing with the two podcasts. But other than that, the enjoyment is definitely the same, right? Getting to meet cool people and talk about cool stuff. Obviously, the topics are more focused. So rarely do we have a topic where I'm not relatively aware of what it is and what's going on. And there's not tons of new content that comes my way with JavaScript Jabber. Like every other episode we do is potentially some new topic. And it's oftentimes something you barely even heard of, let alone have a good concept as to what it does. We certainly had plenty of episodes where I had no idea what something did and had the episode and thought, oh, wow, that's really cool. I'll have to check that out,
Yep. Yeah, that's really true. And especially, I think it's easier in that way with Adventures in Angular because it's a smaller ecosystem.
Yeah.
And a lot of the things that are moving are being driven by the same people.
Yeah.
And so if you're paying attention to the Angular team and you're paying attention to the Angular conferences and maybe a few other people who are blogging about stuff, you can keep on top of it and you can say, oh, okay, that's where this is coming from.
Right. No, I definitely agree. So it's easier to keep your thumb on the pulse of what's going on in Angular with JavaScript as a whole, right? And we could devote the whole podcast just to the back end of JavaScript. We could devote the whole podcast, obviously, like we have, to a subset, which is like Angular, right? To get good coverage of, there's all the frameworks, there's all the techniques, all the tools. There's just so much ground to cover. And that's what's really enjoyable about JavaScript Jabber.
Yep. So the next question is, or I guess, we're into that next question, but ngconf. So what's the story behind that? I know we talked about this on Adventures in Angular, but do you want to kind of recap that a little bit?
You're talking about the birth of ngconf?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So that job that I got at Domo doing front end, we'd hired on a couple of guys that were big time engineers at actually at the LDS church, and we'd hired them away from the LDS church. They were working for the LDS church. So we hired them, and those two guys were Dave Geddes and Aaron Frost. At the time, it was funny. At the time, we had Domo had a real problem hiring, and the CEO, Josh James, who's this one of the big heroes of the Utah tech scene because he had a big company launch before, and now he's got Domo, which is just going crazy.
That was Omniture, right?
Yeah, Omniture. Yep.
Just purchased by Adobe.
Yeah, for a lot of money. So he talked to, I think it was a couple of engineers, and said, look, we need to hire people. I guess we're having problems. And he just heard about it in some staff meetings. He says, set up lunches with me and your friends, your best friend, your friends that are the best developers, So I can't remember who it was that knew Dave and Aaron, but set up lunches and got Dave and Aaron to come in, and Josh James gave him the Josh James sales pitch. And so they came on board, and I think that was what kind of brought Angular to Domo. We were a backbone shop before then, and they brought Angular in, and we switched over to Angular. And then at some point along the way, we'd already had Kip Lawrence working. He'd been working for Domo for quite a long time, actually before Josh James even got involved and bought it up. But he'd been organizing a little conference here in Utah, the Utah JavaScript Conference. And so him and I believe Aaron had this idea to do an Angular conference because nobody was doing anything like that at the time. And I'd been helping out Kip a lot with the JavaScript conference, the Utah JS conference. Mm-hmm. And Dave was, big into Angular as well. So they grabbed me and Dave and said, hey, we have this idea to start up a new conference. And I said, great, but four is a bad number because there's no tiebreaker. Let's bring in a fifth guy. That was the whole reason we brought in a fifth guy. So we brought in Merritt Christensen. And then we said, let's organize a conference. And Utah JS is this little small time thing, like 150 people, right? And it was run at a public library where you paid $2,000 to have it for the day. And we decided, this is Angular could be big. Let's do someplace big. And we looked at a lot of locations and finally settled on the Little America Hotel. So we could have up to 700 people. And we were hoping for like 400, maybe even 500, but knew that it would go up to 700. And all of a sudden they're saying, okay, great. Yeah. If you want to do it, you got this, here's this contract for essentially $250,000. You got to sign, right? And you're on the line for $250,000.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that's combined food and hotel nights. And so here we are, four guys that had barely done anything in this space, signing a $250,000 contract. And then the funny story is that we'd announced our tickets, and the pricing was almost like arbitrary. Like we threw a dart at a board and said, well, let's make the ticket $700 and the early birds will be $600. We never did an analysis to see if it was financially viable or not. So we did that, and a few people on the internet, of course, complained that was too expensive. Naturally, everybody on the internet, no matter what you do, the internet will complain about it. So a few people complained, and a couple of the organizers got really freaked out. The day that the tickets were going to go on sale, our early bird tickets, we'd allocated, I think, 100 or 150 early bird tickets. The day they were going on sale, two of the organizers were convinced that this was a bad idea, that the ticket price was way too high. We needed lower ticket prices. We need to move away from the Little America, this amazing, beautiful, high-end hotel, and instead go to the Utah State Fairgrounds. They had this essentially a big barn. Right?
Yep.
It wasn't an animal barn, but it was just this big structure building that was so plain and low rent, but it was super cheap and would hold a lot of people. They were convinced we needed to do that. And I'd been the one dealing with the hotel up to that point. And I said, we can't get out of our contracts. We'd have to declare bankruptcy and all this sort of stuff. Right? We can't do it. And finally, it was two of us wanted to stick with what we were doing, and two of us wanted to last minute change and lower the ticket prices by $100. And so finally that fifth guy, Merrick Christensen, yet again came in and said, it's too late to even think of doing anything else. We just got to stay the course. And this is like at 11:50 a.m. and tickets were going on sale at noon. So 10 minutes before tickets were going to go on sale, the tiebreaker came in and said, no, leave things the same. Noon hit, and we went and refreshed the little admin control panel to see how ticket sales were going as noon hit. And the one page refreshed, and the tickets were all sold out. 150 of them, boom, gone. 5 seconds. And we were just flabbergasted, of course. And then somebody was like, I guess we should have raised prices. But it ended up going pretty well, and we was kind of tried to stick to that same cost structure. We charge about $400 a day, and that lets us have it at a really nice hotel and have really great food and have money to spend on fun entertainment to go along with the good education. And we can bring in a lot of the best speakers and bring in a lot of scholarships and other people to help out. And boy, it's been awesome. But that was essentially the birth of NGConf, was this, hey, we're going to just do this and let's just randomly pick some stuff. And because I'd been trying to get hired on with the Angular team, I knew some of them. Aaron Frost, he was a GDG, a Google Developer Group advocate. And so he kind of knew them as well and had dinner with them and approached them about be coming to this conference. And they said, hey, if you guys go through a conference, yeah, we'll come and speak. And I'm sure they didn't think we were serious. And all of a sudden there's this NGConf thing, and it's just going, and it's going crazy. And we're selling out tickets. We put the main portion of the tickets on sale a few weeks later, and they sold out in 10 seconds, like 400 tickets, boom, 10 seconds later. So it has just been a kind of a crazy ride. And since then, I've done a lot of conferences, and none of them have gone like NGConf. It's been definitely the easiest and the biggest by far.
Nice. And it seems to have gotten bigger and bigger every year.
Yeah, we were careful about adding people. We ultimately did double in size and go to 1,400 people. But when we did that, we also added another day so that people would still have more time to be involved. And, if you're one of 1,400 people, you probably just feel like a little tiny cog. We want it to feel more intimate. So we wanted people to have opportunities to talk with the Angular team and to talk with the Google developer experts for Angular and even organizers, right? And sponsors. We wanted those conversations to be able to happen, and the main personalities in the industry like John Papa, Dan Moline, Ward Bell. We wanted people to have those opportunities. So we added another day, and that extra day was kind of not a lot of structure. There's education going on all day long, but you can sort of pick and choose. It's not like we're just doing talks all day long. And if you're not sitting in a seat watching the talks, then you're not benefiting, right? We want it to be a more free-form day. And we feel like it's kept it fairly intimate at that point, but we would never, I shouldn't say never, but I don't think we would ever grow beyond this mark, because we've already feel like, okay, this is about as big as we can grow it and still kind of keep the quality high,
right,
and the opportunities and the intimacy where we want them.
So, so then we get into the spinoff of NG Cruise.
Yeah, so that was kind of a funny thing because Kip Lawrence had that idea originally, probably almost 2 years ago, right? And we talked about doing it on and off, but nothing ever got serious. And then maybe last summer, I kind of got serious and did some preliminary investigation. And then everybody was kind of like, well, maybe. So we just sort of bagged the idea. And then Tracy Lee came along and she said, hey, I'd really like to do an Angular cruise. And we heard about it. So we started talking to her. And so we kind of let her lead the effort mainly, and we sort of help out just as we can. I do quite a bit of work with her on NG Cruise, but she kind of is the main driving force behind NG Cruise, presented by NG Conf, right? So it's still an NG Conf spinoff, but Tracy is kind of the lead, and she's been amazing. Been great to work with. So it's been pretty funny seeing that whole thing. Tickets have just barely gone on sale. So the CFP is still open. Hasn't even. I don't think it's fully closed yet. I think most speakers have been chosen, but there might be one or two still to come. And right now we're working on what are the fun activities like shore excursions we're going to go on and do some unconference type stuff, open spaces and things. So that's been really fun though to see that go. And now that NG Conf is sold out, I'm sure we'll start seeing people saying, all right, well, I'd like to go on the cruise too. But it's been an interesting thing trying to do a conference on a cruise. A lot of challenges to it.
Oh, I'm sure. I know a few people who have done conferences on cruises, and depending on how technical it is and how much people rely on things like internet access and cell phone access and where you're traveling to. Yeah. It gets interesting pretty fast.
Yeah, we're telling all the speakers, do not rely on internet access. Even though there technically will be internet access, don't rely on it. Yep. Make sure that you can give your talk with no internet access at all.
Yep.
And to be honest, I mean, I don't know how many conferences you've gone to. We haven't had much in the way of internet, but I've gone to tons. And I feel like when I'm an attendee at a conference, if I don't have internet access, that just means I can't check my email.
Yeah.
But the actual education that's there to be had at a conference is more about watching the talks and taking notes than it is about, again, we've debated this as conference organizers many times of just not having internet access, because then people pay more attention for what little tiny bit we would lose of somebody wanting to take notes, online, right? Or be able to, hey, I just saw something. I want to go check it out really quickly online while they're talking. We would gain a bunch of people not checking their email. Yeah,
it's funny. I tend at this point to put my laptop away. If the talk's not interesting enough to hold my attention, then I'll just get up and go to a different talk. And if I can't find a talk that I'm that interested in, then I'll go into like some common area and sit down and pull my laptop out and work. But yeah, for the most part, I tend to just put it away because I'm there to do things that I can't normally do. And so, yeah, I completely agree. One other thing that I'm just going to bring up, I know this isn't hey, you're a conference organizer and I have an idea, but I'll just throw this out there. At MicroConf, they actually have, it's a one-track conference. It's not a multi-track like NGConf kind of is and kind of isn't this last time. Right. But they had a designated note taker.
Oh, really?
The sessions, yeah. And so I think the last 2 years it's been Kai Davis. But anyway, so he just gets a Google Doc and he takes notes for everybody during the talk. And then the organizers essentially get up and say, we have somebody who's going to take excellent notes for you. So you don't have to put your laptops away and just soak up what we're giving you in the talks.
Oh, that's awesome. I went to a conference, I think it was Empire.js in New York. And they had it where there was a designated area where you were allowed to have your laptops open. It was way in the back, but the majority of the seats, no laptops open. They'd get up at the beginning of every talk and just say, just a reminder, please put your laptops away if you're sitting in the main section. If you need to have your laptop open, go up to the top, the back, and do that there. And I really like that. But yeah, the opportunity to, not every talk is going to be interesting, so you can always pull out your laptop and do some work at that time. I think the best conference ever is that conference. And Yes, I know it sounds like I'm pointing at something, but literally the name is called that conference in Wisconsin at the Kalahari Resort, which is a huge indoor water park. So, and there's an hour and a half in between, or each talk is spaced an hour and a half apart. So I think it's like the talk's an hour long and then the break's a half hour long. So if there's a time frame when you don't have a talk you want to go to, then you can go hit the water park. And an hour and a half is plenty of time to change your swimsuit, go hit the water park, go on some rides, come back, dry off, get your regular clothes back on, and be back in your seat for the next session. So I love that conference and love going to it every year.
Yeah, I'll also just tell people that if there's a session that you're not interested in, or they don't have a session that you're really keen on seeing, go to the back of the room, go out to where the exhibitors are, and see who's out there, and just get to meet people. Because again,
right.
That's something that you can't do at home that you can do at the conference.
Yes.
Yeah. Anyway, let's go ahead and move into the last question, and that is, what are you working on now?
Well, I'm just finishing up. I've literally just submitted it to be published. My Angular 2 Fundamentals course. I think I mentioned it already. It's 9 hours and some odd, almost 10 hours long, right? And covers Angular 2 really in depth from a beginner standpoint. Really gives you a good overview and coverage of Angular 2. You don't have to be an Angular 1 developer, have any Angular 1 experience to be able to take the course. So that's probably my big thing. And then I'll work on some other Angular courses right now I'm starting the Angular 2 migration course to migrate from Angular 1 to Angular 2. Of course, I call it Angular 2, but really the official name is just Angular. Mm-hmm. And because version 4 is going to be out here soon of Angular. So anyway, migrating from Angular 1 to Angular, I guess, would be the name of that. But yeah, let's not talk about the naming fiasco and just roll with it, right? But so Pluralsight courses are definitely the big thing that I've got going on right now. Obviously, until April, that'll be NGConf, and we got a lot of prep work involved in that. And I may be showing up at NG Vikings in Denmark in February.
Ooh, cool.
So that could be cool. Yep. Love Denmark and love the organizers of that conference. There are a lot of good people, so I'm working with them, trying to see if I can make it out there. But yeah, Pluralsight courses, I think, now that Angular 2's hit release, I spent a long time building that Angular 2 Fundamentals course. And once that's out, I want to drop a few more Angular 2 courses out there, get some other good learning out there for people to benefit from. So those are my big projects right now.
Awesome. So the last question is, do you have some picks for us?
Yeah. I want to pick Costa Vida. I just went to Costa Vida. I think it's a local Utah company. It's Mexican food. It's like Fresh Mex. It's a little bit like what's that
Cafe
burrito
Rio.
place? Cafe Rio, but they're only slightly bigger, right?
Yeah.
What's the other
Chipotle?
Fresh Mex burrito? Chipotle. There you go. It's a lot like Chipotle, but I think it's better. So I want to pick Cafe Rio for good food.
Cafe Rio or Costa Vida?
Oh, sorry. Costa Vida. I do like Cafe Rio too, but I like Costa Vida just a little bit better. Their sweet pork quesadilla is to die for. The sweetest pork you've ever had. So if you're ever passing through Utah, I think there's probably a few in some neighboring states. Try to make some time, and even there's a lot on the freeway. Stop in, have a little Costa Vida. So that'll be my pick for today.
I always get the sweet pork salad.
Oh, yeah?
Yep. And I like that. Yeah, I'm looking at their location map. It looks like they have one in Chicago and one in Kansas City.
Oh, wow.
But most of them are in the West, California. There are a ton of them in Utah and Idaho. But they have a couple in Washington, a couple in Nevada, a handful in Arizona, one in New Mexico, and a bunch in Colorado. So, yeah, check them out. Oh, they have a few in Dallas, too.
Cool. Yeah, and definitely I should also pick NG Cruise, right? It's going to be awesome. Much more intimate environment than NG Conf. So if you're looking to just hang out with just a couple of hundred other Angular developers and really get to have good quality time and really make some awesome connections with the people whose names you know and who you follow on Twitter, then come to NG Cruise. It's going to be great. Really, really excited about that.
Very cool. Well, I've got a pick or two myself. So when I talked to Isaac, I picked CES 2017. I'm going to be going down to Las Vegas the first weekend in January for CES, looking at all the cool gadgets and stuff and trying to figure out what you can code and what you can code it with, because they all have development kits and APIs that you can hit.
Right.
But when I decided to go down, I booked my stay using Airbnb. And the reason is that as soon as CES announces its dates, the cost on the hotel rooms goes up about 4x. So the hotel rooms go from $50 a night or $100 a night to $250 a night to $400 a night. And when I went last year, I kind of went spur of the moment because I was going down for a few other things. And I think the first night I stayed down there, I found a room for $200 for that night. And the second night I was there, we couldn't find anything. We wound up staying out in Mesquite. So
wow,
it fills the whole town. So I booked early on Airbnb, and of course the dirty rotten person who I booked with, I think they figured out that it was CES and that they could charge about 4 times what they had charged me because I booked it in August. So I had to go book another stay, and I still got a decent deal. It was $100 a night. But yeah, I really like it for just the ability to go down. I get an entire place to myself. I can just pick up some breakfast cereal or whatever I decide I want to have for breakfast and just stay there. And then when I'm done, leave. And, it's a little bit quieter, a little more relaxing for me than staying in a hotel. So I'm going to pick that. When I do stay in a hotel, I have a Hilton Honors membership, and I'll mention that as well. If you travel much, then having those frequent user, frequent flyer, frequent, whatever, deals is a terrific deal. So I think I've earned free nights at Hilton after going to New York because we stayed in the Hilton Garden Inn there.
Nice. And
I just achieved silver medallion status on Delta on my trip to New York City as well. And so, yeah, whenever I fly now, it's only the gold and diamond medallion people that have priority over me for a free upgrade to first class if a seat opens up.
Wow.
And then you can also go use the Sky Lounge or whatever they call it. And so, just having those frequent flyer things is real nice. Another nice side effect of that was about 3 years ago, my wife had a cousin die out in Missouri, and we really weren't in a financial position to pay for airline tickets, but I had those miles. And so I was able to send her and her sister, and the whole trip cost them $30 to fly out there because we used the miles. They just had to pay the fee. So anyway, yeah, if you travel often, those are all great options for you. And since we talked about conferences, you can check that out. Sometimes it's a better deal than the hotel.
Right.
Well, Joe, if people want to follow you, check out what you're doing these days, anything like that, what's the best place for them to go to figure that out?
By far, Twitter. I do have a personal blog site, but I don't really blog a ton. So I'm fairly active on Twitter, so you can find me at twitter.com/JOSEPHEAMES. I just got to verify. I forget. Yeah, Joseph Eames, EAMES. So you can find me there. That's where I hang out most of the time. I like to keep in touch with people over Twitter, so that's the best place by far.
Very cool. Well, we'll go ahead and wrap this one up. And thanks for coming again, Joe.
Yeah, you bet. Thank you.
Bandwidth for this segment is provided by CacheFly, the world's fastest CDN. Deliver your content fast with CacheFly. Visit CACHEFLY.com to learn more.